So I was able to see a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. It was actually through the IPFW college, and they did the production. Actually, it was in 2016 of last year. I believe it was in April, it's a very, very good production. And actually, the whole production is on YouTube. That's how I found it. If you type in a Midsummer Night's Dream, it'll come up and it'll say IPFW Department of Theater Midsummer Night's Dream production. And it was actually a really, really solid production. There were a lot of very interesting visuals and a lot of really cool modernization elements that were put into that. And I'm going to be talking about a little bit about those right now. And so actually one of the biggest things that I really want to highlight and touch upon is the idea of chaos. Chaos is something that actually was brought to my attention as we were studying Romeo and Juliet, and the first presenter, when he mentioned the idea of chaos and how his presentation kind of centered around the chaos, I actually noticed a lot of that also transitioned over into A Midsummer Night's Dream. We see a lot of chaos throughout the play. And one of the things that is very interesting about the play is because it is a comedy, one of Shakespeare's comedies, it actually presents itself in a satirical manner. And so one of the things that he satirizes is the idea of marriage. As we've read in our book, the concept of marriage and money was one of the sections that we touched upon in the book. It was huge, and there was a lot of emphasis on this idea of marrying for economic stability and some sort of social power, if you could do that, and the idea of the patriarchal society and the way that the male has this stronger presence within a relationship and the way that that works. And I think that some of those ideas are really presented very well throughout this play and the way that they're satirized. And one of the strongest places that we see that is with the character of Aegis. Now you can see this actually in the play by itself, but I think that when you see it staged, it actually stuck out to me a lot more. So one of the really interesting things that I found in my research was looking at this idea of the patriarchal society and the way that marriage actually works within the ideas of the patriarchal society. In one of the scholars that I had looked into, Stephanie Chamberlain, she really dives into this in her article titled The Law of the Father, Patriarchal Economy in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And so one of the things that she really touched upon pretty heavily is the character of Aegis, and I think that he is a very, very important character, even though he has like a very minor role. And one of the reasons that he is a major character is because of this idea of chaos and the way that he contributes to it as part of this satirical piece. So in the article, one of the things that she mentioned was the fact that Aegis really uses the fact that his daughter is disobeying his demands as one of his talking points to really bring to Theseus. So I thought that was very interesting, and I think that it really stands out as one of the things that you really see in this play. As you see the characters and the way that they're staged in the staging of it, you see the lovers are very spread out. As you see Hermia and Lysander and Demetrius, they're very spread out on stage. And I think that really highlights the character of Aegeus as he's coming and presenting his issues between him and his daughter with the Duke, Theseus. And it really highlights this idea because you're kind of like, what is the issue here? And you see them kind of really arguing and not really getting along as they're coming onto the stage. And so when you see Aegeus really, he stands out in a way that could really be lost when you're just reading it. And so in this staging of it, you really get to see him come up to the front and really show that his issue is that his daughter is not obeying him. Which makes sense because then Theseus has to take it upon himself to really see, okay, well, this is a patriarchal society, you owe this to your father, and so here's your ultimatum. So I thought that was one of the really, really interesting parts. Another interesting thing, specifically about this staging of this play, was the fact that it was very visual. And I think that's something that could really be lost in just the simple reading of it. Now, in the first scene, what we have is Theseus and Hippolyta battling each other. And now it's something that is mentioned very, very briefly at the beginning that they have battled each other and that Theseus ends up on top. He actually says that he has beaten her many times in battle, but he wants to wed her completely differently than the way that their love has formed. And so I think it's very interesting that they actually started with a battle between Theseus and Hippolyta, because that's something that could really, really easily be lost. But it creates a little more to Hippolyta's character, and it makes their love situation seem very, very different than when you're simply just reading through it and, you know, going through it. And I think that also the way that they staged it, they ended with kind of a uncertainty as to who won this fight. And with the lines at the beginning, you really see that, okay, Theseus has won, and that's how they kind of formed their love. So I thought that was a very interesting addition to the play. Another very, very interesting thing, also in terms of the visual aspect of it, is the fairies. There is an element to the play that is very hard to capture when just reading the play, and it is the fairy songs. But what this one does is they add music to it. And this one actually took the time to create a modern take on the music to it, which really can rope in the audience and add a little extra element to the story. The way that they modernized the song. It was the same Shakespeare lyrics, but they added it to the song of Genie in a Bottle by Christina Aguilera, which was, especially for me viewing it, it was something that I really, really appreciated, and I was able to say, wow, this is something that I can identify with and relate with. And the initial fairy song was put into this style, and then it transitioned into Oberon's entrance, because Oberon enters after Titania has fallen asleep. And the way they transitioned that entrance was they had the fairies left, and Oberon comes in and actually takes the last line that the fairies sing. The last line that the fairies sang in this version was So Good Night with Lullaby. And so the way that they sang it was more like, so good night with lullaby, la 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 lullaby. And they used that as the fairies were exiting. And so as Oberon came in, he came in with a much darker voice, and they also changed the lighting cues a little bit to give it more of a darker overcast onto his character. And this was absolutely fascinating because it created a sense of something is about to happen. It shows that something mischievous is about to happen. The darker tone and the darker singing of that last line before he goes into casting a spell on Titania, it really captures the mischievousness that is about to occur. And it's more like a so good night with lullaby, la 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 lullaby. Really an important element to creating the relationship between Titania and Oberon, and it also opens the door for like the chaotic elements that Oberon wants to be in control of. And along with the chaotic elements, it's very interesting to see the way that everything kind of works itself out in the end. There's a spell cast on Titania, there's a spell cast on Bottom, there's a spell that's mixed up with all the lovers. This staging of the play was absolutely beautiful, and I think that it captured a lot of the elements that I was really looking for in a staging of this play, and it really enhanced the viewing experience for me in a lot of positive ways, especially through the seeing minor characters in a more stronger light, and which helped emphasize the way that Shakespeare had created the satire. Also in the way that the effects and visualizations helped to enhance the story and enhance the relationships that Shakespeare was trying to create within this story. These really work together to really create this wonderful story that Shakespeare has created, and it was a lot of fun and a lot of really interesting additions that I didn't get to get into, but these main ones were very fun, and there's a link in the description if you want to see the whole